Thanksgiving is the type of holiday that doesn't do enough justice to the tribal communities, indigenous people of the land. So let me ask you a question. If all of you here made a beautiful meal, or better yet, you do the best you can to grow your own food, you do the best you can to gain your own water, some of you go get wood, some of you take care of your children, you guys are doing the best you can to take care of your family, making sure that you understand and you value life, right? And then somebody shows up and says, hey, I'm hungry, I need help. And you say, okay, yeah, we can help you. Well, we're here. This is what we do. We take care of people. That's our way. And then those people turn around and do a lot of horrible things to you. So they do a lot of bad things to you. And they're like bad, I don't want to mitigate and make the badness not horrible. So there's a lot of bad history there. There's a lot of chaos and atrocity and a lot of violence that was done to my people in those moments. So that particular moment, the way that it's displayed maybe in America, is not an actual representation of how we would feel. I think that it's very downplayed. And I think that when you look at it that way, if you just look at the images, it's like people are smiling and they're just eating corn. That's a really poor representation of what occurred. Where I come from, my people, our languages. So let me give you an example. So do you see this tree here? So this tree, I don't know what type of pine tree that is, right? But I know it's a tree, right? In our language, so let's say, for example, this tree. Let's say it was a tree that had leaves on it, right? Let's say the tree had a bunch of big leaves on it. The tree with a bunch of big, beautiful leaves on it. So in our culture, our rituals and culture, our understanding of the land is really significant to us. How significant, I'll explain to you in just a minute. So when you see the leaves on a tree, you know how they move like this? When the wind blows and they kind of sparkle and they're real beautiful and they move like that? Yeah. So when the leaves move in the trees, right? Our word for that leaf, for a leaf, is called naka. Naka is the leaf, but naka doesn't only mean leaf. Naka means an ear. It's the tree's ears. The way that the tree hears and the way that the tree moves and the way that the tree understands. Our name, like for us as human beings, like for us in our tribe, our name for our ears are naka. Our ear, for our name here, to hear, is to naka. And to naka is to hear, to listen, to have ears, right? So we didn't say that the tree had ears. We didn't name that tree. We didn't say, oh, that tree has naka. It didn't work that way. In our culture, the reason we have naka is because the tree has the naka. We learned about our body parts and our understanding from the tree. We didn't name the tree named us. You understand? So we have leaves for ears because the tree had leaves for ears. We didn't assume that we could name everything and be like that. We didn't think about the world that way. So when part of our culture and our rituals and customs is always paying attention to the land, always paying attention to the land and understanding that all this stuff that you see here has a history. Every single thing here is connected to each other and it requires each other to live and exist. So just like we have to listen to the tree, tell us about ourselves. So the tree, nature has told us about ourselves. We don't tell nature about ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So you have a huge job to do. I have a huge job to do. We all have huge jobs to do, but you have a job to do. So the one thing that I tell my children, and my daughter's, 9, she just turned 10 years old. I tell my daughter this all the time. Every day I tell her all the time. I said, because my daughter, her name is Pasituva. And in my language, Pasituva means wild iris. And so that's her name, Pasituva. So I tell Pasituva and I say, Pasituva. And my son, his name is Bishapi, and he's 14. And my daughter, her name is Tiavi, and she's 14. I tell my children every day when I see them, all the time when we talk about this, I tell my kids, you have a responsibility to your community and to the people and to the land. This life that you live, you have to take care of lots of people. You have to take care of all these people. All these people that you see around you, you're gonna have to take care of them one day. And all these people require you to care for them and love them and help them. That's your responsibility. And that you weren't born to just run off into the world and think that whatever you want to do or however you feel is entirely up to you and you just want to do whatever you're going to do. You have a responsibility that's greater than that. You have a responsibility to the land, to make sure that the land is always protected and beautiful and safe. And you have a responsibility to the people. And what does the people mean? It means all of us here. And so I tell my children the same thing that I'm telling you, that we all have responsibilities and jobs to do. So when we think about what it is that we can do moving forward, what can we all do moving forward? We can acknowledge that as allies, as people like that, right? So people here, what can we do? Never forget, as long as you're on this continent, and I'm not just saying like the continent North America, I'm not saying like America, I'm saying North America. Everything that goes from the top to the bottom here, there are people that have lived on that land since the beginning of time. So wherever you go, whatever state you're in, whatever province you're in, whatever country you're in this space, understand that there are people that have been living on that land since the beginning of time, existing with that land. So when we go into places, be respectful of those people and always recognize that's one way you can do this. It's the simplest and most respectful way of doing it. Always recognize the people's land that you're standing on. Always. Because the moment we stop recognizing people, the moment we stop thinking about it, is the moment we make another mistake and start offending people. So this land that we're on here, like this land here where we are, this land where we are, is the home of the Washoe people, the Paiute people, the Shoshone people. There's lots of other peoples that have lived on this land, but that's really important. So when you go to different states, I'll give you an example. Let's say you move to Idaho. You move to Boise, Idaho. There's tribal people that live there. Do research when you move to different spaces in the country and find out the people that live there. And if you can find out the people that have lived there, the original people that have lived there, anytime you go into a public space, anytime you go into a school or academic space or whatever that is, make sure that you're having that conversation and recognizing those people that live there, because it's very important, because those tribal people are still there and they still exist. So understand that what we're doing here today, my people, my tribe, my people, my language, my culture, my way of life exists, and we exist every day. So that's what you can do. I don't know if that's a really long answer.
No, that was great.
So, how are you guys doing today? Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. My name is Brian Melendez. I'm Northern Southern Paiute-Western Shoshone. I'm a member of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. I was born in Reno, Nevada. Anybody been to Reno? Yeah? That's where I was born. So, right there where I was born at St. Mary's Medical Hospital. Anybody know where the university is? UNR? One of my great grandmothers was born right where that building was, right where the football stadium was. And right where the university sits was one of my people's old encampment where our people used to live on the side of the mountain up there. So I don't know why I was thinking about that. It just came to my mind and I thought I would share that, because every time I go up there, I think about my grandma. So anyways, I came here to spend some time with you to do a couple things, one of which is do the best I can at answering any questions you may have. And so I know I was blessed to be able to hang out with the 4th grade class earlier, and they had a lot of really amazing and beautiful, just interesting questions, and the kind of questions that I love to answer. So before we get too far into the other parts of what we're going to do today, I want to go ahead and answer any questions that you have on the top of your mind right now before I get into anything. So I'm going to start taking questions in just a couple minutes. So in about 3-4 minutes, I'll start taking questions. So before I get into that, I want to talk about something really important. So this area where we are, right? This area where we're at right now is the traditional homelands of the Washoe, the Paiute, and Shoshone people of this land. So before we get into that, I want to explain what that means, and I want to do a little bit more service to that type of land acknowledgement. So again, like I said, my name is Brian. So when you see me around, just say hello. So I live on the Hungry Valley Indian Reservation. I moved to the Hungry Valley Indian Reservation when I was 12 years old. 12 years old. And I've been off and on the reservation most of my life. I live within my community. I live within the tribal space where I live. On my reservation, we have 3 distinct tribal communities and cultures that exist in one space. We have Shoshone people, we have Paiute people, and we have Washoe people all living in one space. My tribe is a pretty large tribe, considering, and I think right now our tribal membership's at around a little under 3,000 tribal members, the tribal people that live, that are enrolled within the tribe. We have probably double or triple of that live within the communities. So it's probably about 12 to 15,000 tribal people that live within the area that are all connected to each other and the tribe. So in Nevada, and so now we're in California, right? But in Nevada, where I'm from, we have 27 federally recognized tribes in the state of Nevada. What that means is when you think about the state and the shape of Nevada, the way that it looks, all throughout that state, there are all these 27 tribes that exist in there. All the way around Reno, where I live, there's at least 7 really large reservations within a 100-mile circumference of where I live, which means there's a lot of land base and there's a lot of tribal people that live there. So Nevada is a pretty heavily populated state for tribal people. So I wanted to kind of share that with you. Somebody asked a really great question earlier in the 4th grade class, and I want to kind of jump off and reiterate what that question was. And they asked me, what excuse me, what is my role with my tribe? What do I do with my tribe? So, like I said, I moved to the reservation when I was 12 years old. I come from a tribal culture. And what that means as a tribal person, like what that means to me and my understanding and interpretation of that, it means that the community, the people, and the land all have a significant part to play with the way I exist every day. And that I cannot think about, I really don't think about my community and the land and the people separate. It's all one thing. And so when I think about my language and my cultures and our ceremonies and our rituals and the way we exist, it's all inclusive. It's all one giant thing. And so as a tribal person, that's how I understand my community. And so we're talking about lots of families, lots of relatives that live with each other, multi-generations of people, grandmas and grandpas and little kids and lots of people living together. And that's the way that we've always existed, living with each other. So that's a really normal existence for us. That's a really normal existence for me. So when I live in my community where I come from, there's all kinds of relatives. So like, for example, I have three children. So I have a 10-year-old daughter. Her name is Pasituva. I have a 14-year-old son. His name is Bishapi. And I have a 14-year-old daughter. Her name is Tsiavi. And so my children, when we're in our community, we're in our space, they get to be there with 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 uncles and aunties and grandmas, and I don't even know how many grandmas they have, right? How many great-grandparents and relatives that are around them all the time. And so because our relationship networks are so big, family has a huge part to play in how we exist every day. So like for me, when I cook food in my house, it's not like I just make a plate of food for myself. I go home and every day I'm cooking giant meals every day because I have so many people that are going to come over every day and I'm going to feed them. And I don't even know who these people are that are coming over. They're just relatives and people that just kind of move within each other's home spaces. So I always cook a lot of food because I know that people are going to come over and they're going to need to be fed and I need to feed them. And if I go to one of my relatives' house, they're always cooking food and I'm going to go eat with them. So in my community where I come from, that's really important. That's who I am and that's my community and the way I see the world from a real communal tribal space. Now, the tribal community, another aspect of tribal communities is that we have a language, we have, songs and rituals and customs that are associated with the land. So I'll give you an example. So look around at all the stuff you see here. You see the trees and the grass and the rocks and the mountains and the stones and all these things here. So in my language, So in my language, my word for tree is Singasibatu. So Singavi. So I could say Singasibatu, Singavi, I could say that name for a tree. But that name for the tree is a very specific tree in the specific area where I come from. And when I say that river or the lake or the land, these are all things that are really specific to me. So my language and custom comes from the land from where I'm at. And so it's almost, best way I can explain it is if I were to move to a different part of the world, then I would be taking my identity and my culture and my language to another part of the world. But the way that I would identify with that land would be very different too, because there are people that live and exist on that land that have different words for those trees, and they have different words for that river and those elements that exist there. And so that's what I think about as a tribal person. Wherever I go, somebody has a name or an understanding for the land and the resources. So that's just a little bit about me and where I come from. So I've done a lot of things in my community. I hold a lot of responsibility in my community. I do a lot of work in my community. I've been an elected legislative official for my tribe. I've created laws. I've created processes. I've created programming. I've done lots of things for my tribe. Everything from find my community health care and education and resources. I've done lots of those things. I'm a law enforcement officer for the state of Nevada, so I've done that too. I've worked as an operations officer for the federal government. I've been an operations officer for the federal government, and I've had jurisdiction over lots of tribal communities. And now I work for myself. So now I own my own business and I work for myself within my tribal communities. And I do a lot of work with families, and I do a lot of work with communities. And so that's what I do with my life now, and I help a lot of people. And so I go all over the country working with lots of tribal communities, lots of communities. And you know what I do in my job in the community? I help to teach the tribal governments and the people that are there to invest in their greatest resource they have, which is the people. So my whole focus is on people. So I work to help to develop the human capital and social equity of the people. And I make sure that the governments, as they exist, that the governments don't always or ever forget that the people have to be taken care of. So that's what I do as my job. It may not sound really interesting, but I love it, and I get to work and be with a lot of people. So before I jump into the questions, we're going to do a couple questions. We're going to answer some questions because I know you have some questions, and I want to answer those for you. We're also going to do a meditation. We're going to slam a lot of content into a little bit of time, but that's pretty normal for me. So let's go ahead and jump right into the questions. I see some hands. I'll start answering them. Yes?
Do you, like, when you work, do you have, like, how do you ever, like, are you, like, helping the people that you own or everyone in the world?
Everyone in the world. Everyone in the world. My job, I'll give you an example, right? So let's say, and this is an example. Let's say that over there in the bushes somewhere is a plant that grows out of the ground, and that plant has a name that my people have given it, and that plant has a really specific use for it, and it helps our bodies. Now, if I know that knowledge as a human being, if I know what I know about that land and about the plant and about how it helps human beings, but I maintain that knowledge within myself and I never tell anybody about it, then the knowledge goes in, it doesn't go anywhere. So what I try to do as an individual is I do the best that I can to help all people. So my job is to help all people in the world, because if my culture has lots of knowledge in it that may help sustain the world and people in harmony, then I have a responsibility too as a human being to go back out into the world to try to make it a better place. And the way that I look at it is this. I come from a reservation. I come from a tribal community. I come from a place where our value system is built on families and community and the understanding of what it means to be a good relative. That's a very high standard of existence. To be a good relative is really important for us. So if I could go out into the world and help people to understand what is important about being a good relative, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I do in my life with everybody. Yes. Yes, you. How do I work in my culture? So that's a great question. What do I do in my culture? I was just answering this question yesterday in a restaurant to a bunch of random people. We were eating sandwiches. And they said, what do you do in your culture? And I said, let me tell you what I do in my culture. So in my culture, we have lots of different roles and responsibilities. Just like you guys are here today at school, some of you are students, some of you are teachers, some of you are parents. Everyone has a responsibility to each other. So what I do in my community, what I do in my culture, is that my job, one of my jobs as a community person, as a tribal leader in my community, is to make sure that our ceremonies and our rituals and our languages and our medicines and our songs are always alive and moving. That's my job. I'm not the only one with that job, but that is my job. And so what I do in my community is I do the best I can to make sure that I am teaching our children, our relatives, and whoever comes how to exist on the land, how to do simple things. Well, I don't want to say simple because it's not always simple, but how to create fire, how to create ceremonies, how to use their language, how to understand and identify medicines, how to live on the world in a certain way, how to exist with each other. So what I do in my community is my specific focus is on very tangible elements. So for me, because I was born at a certain time, I was born in this world here. I'm born here. So my mindset and the way that I think about the world is very different than the way that maybe my grandparents would have thought about the world. It's very different than the way that my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents would have thought about the world. I think about the world in a really modern sense too as a tribal person, because that's the experience I have. So for me, I would be considered, like for me and my community, the way that they would look at me, my community would say that maybe I'm more of a practical realist. I'm more of a pragmatist when I think about my culture. I don't think about my culture in like a real ethereal kind of spacey sense. I only think about my culture and function in my culture about things that we can do and we can create and things that we make and things that we have. So I look at what it is that we are based upon what we can do in our skill sets. That's what I got. That's what I do every day. Yes, you. Oh, that's a beautiful question. The question she asked was, what do my ancestors do for me? Everything. My ancestors do everything for me. I don't even think about my life without thinking about my ancestors. I think about my ancestors every day, all the time, when I'm driving, when I'm walking, when I wake up, when I'm making food, when I'm doing things. They're a part of my thought process every day. And so when I say ancestors, let me expand, let me tell you what I think that means for me. So when I think about my ancestors, and I mentioned this earlier to the 4th grade class, there's a lot of people in the world, sometimes, I mean, lots of us kind of fall into that category. We're all human beings. We all come from people, right? So some people, raise your hand if you know the name of your brother or your sister. Raise your hand if you know your name of your mother or your father. Do you know their name? Raise your hand if you know your name of your grandparents. Do you know their names? Raise your hand if you know the name of your great-grandparents. Raise your hand if you know the name of your great-great-grandparents. Raise your hand if you know the name of your great-great-great-grandparents. Raise your hand if you know the name of your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. Some of you do that. Beautiful. That's a beautiful life. That's a beautiful life. For me and my culture, I know the names of my great-great-grandparents 15 generations from me. And so I talk to them, and I think about them, and I pray to them, and I communicate with them in my own way because they're a part of my story. And so they have a lot to do with my life every day and how I got to this land and where I come from. And so my language is associated to my ancestors, and my language is associated to them in the way they exist in the world. And in my culture, part of our teaching is that my job as a human being today is to be a good relative so I can be a good ancestor for my relatives that are born from me 15 generations from now. So I have to be a good ancestor. So in order for me to be a good ancestor for my descendants that come from me, 5, 10, 15 generations, I have to think about how they existed in the world. I have to try to be the best I can for them, and I have to be the best I can for the future. Yes? What do I use to build things, my things? Everything that you use, right? My people, we live in homes and we drive cars, and we're very modern that way. And so our tribalism and our understanding is connected with everything else that we see here. What's that? Speak up. Do they cook for me? Absolutely. I learned how to be a good cook because my relatives are such good cooks. And I learned how to be a good cook because when I was a little boy, I would go to so many events and people were cooking food and everybody was talking, they were talking smack and teasing each other about each other's food. And so everyone was always teasing each other. So I didn't want people to make fun of me or make fun of my cooking. So I had to learn how to cook. So I'm a pretty good cook because of it.
What's your favorite story or song that passes down traditions or information, and what's it about?
So one of my favorite songs, and I'll sing it to you guys here soon. One of my favorite songs, the literal translation of the song from the language, it says, "There's a man and a woman in the house in the sky." And the understanding about that is, it talks about our creation story of how we believe we came from the earth. And in our culture, in our belief system, we believe that our people, we came from the earth from different aspects. But that our mother, our creator, our mother that made us, she was a giant in our belief system. And that the father that made us was the creator, was the creator from, like, the creator God. And he came down to earth and made himself a giant, and then that's how we came here on the earth. Now, there's lots of different understandings or beliefs about how people are created, but that's one beautiful story that I always loved. It was something that was told to me as part of our creation story, and I loved it. And so that song is associated with that creation story. So I love that song because it reminds me that our ancestors, the people that are with us, that they love us. And so we use that song a lot to represent love. So we use that song to talk about love. Not the kind of love that you would have like romantic love, but love between like our mothers and our children, like that kind of love. It's a real beautiful family love. And so that I sing that a lot, and that's one of my favorite songs.
How has your tribe had to modernize?
Our tribe has had to modernize all kinds of ways. Our tribe has had to modernize in so many ways. Every single element of our government and our tribes has been shifted and changed. So I'll give you an example. So when our people would live on the land and exist on the land, we could just move and we can get food and we could find, shelter and we can eat and we could exist freely. So when everything happened for us, when colonization occurred for us, all these parameters were put on top of our people and we were removed from our natural spaces. So we've had to modernize because we were removed from our land and put into encampments, which are now called reservations. So we've had to modernize because we couldn't go and get the foods that we had to eat to sustain us. So we were now giving processed foods and all these other things that we didn't really want to eat, but that's the only thing we had to eat. So the people have modernized. Now fast forward between now and that, from that time to now, we have governments, we have institutions, we have buildings, we have hospitals and schools and economic development and businesses and universities. We have every single thing that lots of other people have. The difference between our modernization is that the tribes in the United States, we are built on a system that All the tribes. So there are 573 federally recognized tribes in the United States. There's 27 of them in Nevada. And all of those tribes have modern systems. They use modern languages, they use science and all other types of aspects. That's how we modernize every day. So that's what we're doing every day. Yep. Yes. So the origin of the song that I'm talking about comes from my great-great-grandfather, three generations back from my grandmother. And his name was Singasivatu. So in my language, Singasivatu, the literal translation means tree shaver. And he used to peel the bark off the trees to get medicine from the trees. That's how he got his name. And that was his song. No worries, I'll come back to you. Yep. How do I write in my language? With a pencil. With a marker. With color, like how do I write my words? So in our languages, we use different syntax for language. So the English language is a very tricky thing. You know, you go around the world, all around the world, they're going to use different languages. English is one of the languages that sticks out. It just makes no sense for anyone else in the world. So anywhere else in the world, English is strange, right? So in our language, it's kind of the same way. So when we write, we use different writing systems. So we use different writing systems, and they're linguistic systems. And so there are two modern systems that we use. One is called Wycliffe, the other is called IPA. You know the Stone Mother? That's a great question. You know why the Stone Mother is so important to our tribe? Because she's our mother. Our mother, like I was talking about the creation story, our mother was a giant. That's part of the Stone Mother. She is that mother for us. So she is important to us because she's a representation of our people. And so in our culture is very different than lots of cultures. And our tribal roots are very matrilineal. In essence, that our women have a high value in our culture more than what you would see in like a lot of other spaces. So our mothers, our ceremonies and our languages and everything that we keep is given to us and is passed down through our mothers. So our women and our daughters and our aunties and our grandmas have a huge value for us in our culture, which is very different than a lot of like different cultures and identities and ways of life. So our Stone Mother she's a symbolic representation of that for us. Way in the back.
So you're saying your culture is more of like a matriarchy than a more patriarchal culture?
Yes. Yeah. And originally it was. Systematically now we lose all of that. We lose a lot of that cultural understanding every day. So the original process of my tribe, yes. After we were Americanized and modernized and colonized and beaten up a little bit, that's changed a lot.
So you said that one of your ancestors was named for what he did for his work. Are there still people that are named for that?
Absolutely, every day, all the time. We receive our names in ceremonies and rituals. So our names come through ceremonies and rituals, and our names are given to us by the deeds and the ways in which we exist. So we receive names based upon our meritocracy in the way in which the people recognize us and the way in which our ancestors in the spirit recognize us. I know that can be kind of a complicated thing to understand, but that's still part of our understanding. So our language is a very active language. So everything we do is like done in action, right? So like, I'll give you an example. So when we say we eat, like it's like takao, like to eat. And so like if I was going to eat, it'd be like takadu, takao, takao, and takao. So like for a deer, for example, like for a word for a deer, there may be like 5 words just to say a deer, right? There may be 10 words to identify how you're going to eat. When you ate, how you ate, what you ate, where you ate, who you ate with, when were you going to eat, you ate later, what you ate wasn't awesome. But it's very different because it's all really action oriented. So in those languages, the names are still very important. So like my relatives, like they all have names. So like for me, my tribal spiritual name for myself is Depinana. Depinana is the way in which my community knows me. It's the way in which my family knows me. It's the way in which like the ceremony knows me. The people in the ceremony, they know me that way. So in the ceremony, we don't identify, like, they don't use my name like Brian. That's not how I identify. So in the ceremonies and the way we gather and the way we do things, we respectfully identify and address each other through those names. So my name is Depinana. And so when I'm with my people, that's how they identify me. And that's how I identify myself. So when I say my language, so like if I go to a traditional like place where the people are, then I would say Nunumu dipa agaba tukuiba waita inaniana depinana inaniana Brian Melendez Hungry Valley Waita. So what I do is I've identified that my name is this. My spiritual name is this. But my American name is that. Right? And so for my people, like they'll understand like my name, my own individual name is very important. So my tribal spiritual name is Stone Man. And that's what my people call me. And my daughter, her name is Buha Baumamagotni. And her name means Holy Rainwater Woman. And my son, his name is Patusuvana. Right? So all of these people in my family have different relatives, all our communities. It's not something that they could just get, it's something that they have to earn through their own way in recognition to the spirit. I got 20 minutes? Okay. One more question, we're going to do the meditation. Yes. Why is she? Because she's beautiful. She's the stone mother because she's beautiful. She's nice. Treats us good. Yes. Yes. Beautiful. So I'm going to do a really quick, fast rendition of my problem with that as well. So Thanksgiving, so what we understand Thanksgiving to be in the country where we live at is a very different process. Understand that celebratory act isn't something that we're necessarily engaging in all the time. So I kind of gave this example earlier to the 4th grade class. There's 365 days in a year, and in our culture we're told and we're taught that we need to be grateful for 365 days. We need to be grateful every day. And so to just focus on one day and say, hey, we're just going to be with our family one day, figure it out, that's very abstract and strange for us. We're with our families every day. We're with the land every day. We're eating and giving thanks every day. So when somebody says we're just going to do one day of this, that's not really how we function. That's not how we function every day as a tribe. But the other aspects of Thanksgiving that are a bit convoluted and don't really make a lot of sense to us are the fact that there's a lot of historical travesties and problems that have occurred since the beginning of time, where people started making their way to the Americas, to where our land is here. And so there's been a lot of victimization, there's been a lot of chaos and a lot of violence that was that my people experienced in these processes. So when we're talking about the historical traumas that the people are dealing with every day, we have to talk about the elements that occurred. We have to talk about the horrendous victims that they were put through all these horrible things. People went through lots of bad things. People were killed and murdered in the process. There was land that was stolen and taken. There were people and children that were taken from their families. Lots of things happened during those times. And those times aren't super far away. So when I say time, I'm not saying like hundreds of years ago horrible things happened. I'm saying my tribal people have gone through horrible things recently. My mother was taken away into a boarding school. That was my mother. My grandparents were taken away in boarding schools. That was my grandparents. Like, that's my life. That's within my time. When I was born, the boarding school at Stewart was shut down the year I was born. So all of these things are really recent things. So when it comes to that particular holiday, understand that what people are celebrating and how they're coming together isn't actually a great representation of my tribal culture. It's become something else. And that something else is I have no idea what it is. I can't really attest to what the modern Thanksgiving looks like in America because I don't really do that. I haven't been to too many modern Thanksgivings. So if any of you want to invite me to yours, I'll come out and hang out and eat with you because I don't know what that looks like. You know, we hang out and we eat every day. So when you think of Thanksgiving, think of the people, think of the land, think of the people that were here. Say a prayer for them, remember whose land you're on, and remember that we should be giving thanks every day. So, I mean, there's so much more to that. It's like that's a what we're talking about Thanksgiving is it's really a college course, and you could do that for a whole semester really. So I'm gonna go ahead and take some time. I don't have a lot of time left, so I have 10 minutes. So I'm gonna do a really quick exercise with you guys, right? Something that we do in our community, something we do with our children. I'm gonna do a really quick meditation, super fast. I'm gonna sing you a song, okay? Sing you a couple songs. So first things first, I want everybody to close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. Right now, I want you to imagine that you're outside in a big, beautiful valley. And the valley where you're at is beautiful. And it's so wide. And off to the left, off to the left, you see a beautiful tall stand of trees, and the trees are beautiful. And those trees, on the top of the trees, there's green leaves, and they're just sparkling. As we gaze off to the middle of the valley, we see a beautiful path that goes from one side to the other. We see sagebrush and wildflowers. Off to the other side of the mountain, we see a beautiful mountain ridge with beautiful white clouds moving towards us. We can see the shadows cascading on the ground. Off to the right-hand side, we see a beautiful outcropping of rocks coming from the earth. They're sharp and bold and gray and brown and copper, and we can almost smell every mineral in them. They're with us. So as we're in that beautiful valley, we're sinking closer to the earth. We're getting connected back to our Mother Earth. I want you to imagine that where we are is beautiful and pristine. Where we are is untouched only by us. And I want you to take a look at everything you see there, everything in that beautiful valley. And I want you to hold on to that thought. And I want you to examine that thought a little bit deeper. And wherever you are in that thought, maybe you pay attention to the stones or the sagebrush or the clouds, whatever's calling to you. I want you to go to that image, and I want you to go there and examine it a little bit deeper. And I want you to do that right now. So in our culture and our language, we're told in our ceremonies and our rituals that anytime we see a beautiful golden yellow color, it's the color of love. It's the color of love and appreciation that our ancestors and our spirits have for us, and our families and our relatives have for us. So right now, I want you to imagine as we breathe in through our nose, inhaling life into our bodies, I want you to imagine that we see a beautiful golden love-like color moving up to the front of our face, into our eyes, into the top of our heads, making its way down into our bodies, into our chests, wrapping itself around our heart. We see this beautiful golden love-like color moving all the way down into our back, into our spine, into our kidneys, wrapping its way into our stomach, healing our digestional tract, all the way into the tops of our legs, into the bottom of our feet. I want you to remember that this beautiful feeling is the feeling of love that our families and our ancestors have for us. It's a good feeling, a good way to live. So go ahead and take a deep breath. Inhale again through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Take a deep breath. One more deep breath. Exhale. One more deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. Beautiful. So right now, for the next couple minutes, I'm going to go ahead and share some songs with you. And these songs are songs of this land, of this valley. So everybody, if you want to go ahead and lay back, you can lay back, get comfortable, do whatever you do. And I want you to think about the land that you're on, this land that you're laying on. And I want you to remember that there's all types of stories and history and beautiful things on this land. And I want you to say a prayer and a good thought and a good feeling for the Shoshone, the Paiute, the Washoe people of this land. And remember this land. And remember about how it is that we go about existing on this land. And I want you to think about all the gifts and the beautiful things that you have in your families. And I remember that that this world is going to require you to take care of lots of people. You know, this world, this land requires us to take care of each other. You know, we have to take care of our families and our relatives and all the people that need help the most. So that's what we want to do. So I'm going to sing these songs, and I want you to think about that. Whatever good feeling or whatever good thought you have in your mind and your body, I want you to feel good about that. Sing is for the spirits of this land, the people and the ancestors of this land, all the spirits and the ancestors that live in this dirt, all the plants and the trees and the animals and all the things, and all my ancestors that have ever walked in this land here. It's for them. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for letting me be here with you. And I appreciate you. And you know, remember that one more thing, if I can tell you one more thing. You know, I mentioned earlier, you know, with my 3 children, I tell my children every day, I tell them all the time. I tell my children, you go out into the world, and when you're with people in the world, all those things, that whatever it is you're going to do, always remember to be a good relative, always remember to be a good human being, be a good person, be a good brother, a good friend. You know, this is really important. It's important to understand what that means to have good relationships. You have good relationships in the world and try to go out into the world and be good to other people. It's important. And I tell my children that, you know, they have a huge responsibility in this world. You have a huge responsibility, and I tell my babies this all the time. You got a huge responsibility in the world, and there's lots of things that you need to do, but always take care of the people, always take care of the people, and always take care of the land. And you could do those things, you're going to be okay. That's a very important thing to do in this world, taking care of people. And if you can take in what I'm saying, just those two things alone, and you know, if you got anything out of what I said, those two things alone, take care of the people and the land, you're going to learn a lot about yourself.
Loud and proud, buddy.
And the way you understand this land and this world that we live in. So I thank you guys again for your time and consideration. Have a good day, have a good weekend, and feel good. And if you guys have any questions or whatever, you could always get a hold of me.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was pretty powerful when the sun came out on that last piece, so that was pretty special. We want to follow up with some meaningful, heartfelt appreciations. So we'll do a few appreciations. Who has some appreciations they'd like to share? Crew leaders, do you want to pick? You might be the best for this. No? Okay, I got Andy Man up top right there in the red. Loud and proud, buddy. What do you think? Should I bring him up here? Yeah. Okay, Andy, come on up. Andy, come on up. If you want to appreciate, no? Emilio, come on up. All right, we're good there.
There you go.
I appreciate him for coming here to see all of us.
Exactly.
I would like to appreciate Brian for coming here, sharing his culture with us. It really warmed my heart. I was very affected by it. I loved it. Thank you so much. I hope you come again.
Thank you.
Wait, how-
Bijat.
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 I'm thankful for him because, well, he came here and that drum was very, very powerful. It made me remind myself of when my grandma told me about the story about my grandma and grandpa. It was very beautiful, and I really understand a lot of it. So thank you for doing that.
What I appreciate from Brian is him singing the songs, because when he was singing the songs, it really kicked my heart because I really love those songs. Is that you?
I appreciate Brian for coming here and teaching us all these things, and it's really wonderful. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. One more round of applause, everyone.